This club from the North Pole is planning to conquer the Champions League. It doesn't have a big stadium or a billionaire owner. In fact, it shouldn't even exist. But, for reasons we'll see shortly, it keeps winning matches and is now going for the biggest trophy in Europe. Bodø Glimt have won 4 of the last 5 Norwegian league titles. On the continental stage, they made a name for themselves when they beat Mourinho's Roma 6-1 in the 2022 Conference League, a level they later confirmed by reaching the Europa League semi-finals in 2025, knocking out Twente, Olympiacos, and Lazio along the way. Now, they have qualified for the league phase of the Champions League for the first time in their history. The conclusion is clear: winter is on its way. The million-dollar question is how a club from a city of barely 60,000 inhabitants, located in the Arctic Circle, managed to get here. The team is based in the city of Bodø, about 1,200 kilometers from Oslo, the capital of Norway. The main peculiarity of this town has to do with the climate. While in summer there are about 6 consecutive weeks when the sun never sets, during winter, the days can have as little as 3 hours of natural light. As for the temperatures, obviously they are extremely low, reaching 10 degrees Celsius below zero. Looking on the bright side, it also offers natural attractions such as these water whirlpools and the fabulous northern lights. In fact, the club has Glimt in its name as a nod to this phenomenon, since the word means flash or ray. The team plays its home matches at the modest Asmira Stadium, which has a capacity of just 8,270 spectators. For much of the year, it is surrounded by snow, which led the club to use a 100% artificial and heated pitch. Nevertheless, they turned that place into one of their greatest weapons for winning matches. Defeats for Bodø at the Asmira are anything but common. You only have to imagine what it must be like to play there as the away team. When they hosted Olympiacos in the Europa League, the president of the Greek side, Evangelos Marinikis, complained, arguing that a match should not be played in such conditions. The European Federation did not agree, and obviously the thrashing they had inflicted, winning 3-0, was more than valid. However, things haven't always been rosy for our beloved Bodø. There's a reason why it's such a novelty that they've achieved so much success in recent years. When the club was founded, back in 1916, they were a long way from even having the basic facilities needed to train professionally. Just think, in that part of the world, it's only natural for people to want to go ice skating or skiing, not kick a ball around on grass. For that reason, for quite some time, the club was simply fighting for survival. On top of those local problems, we also have to add that the Norwegian Federation didn't help in the slightest. Teams like Troms or even Bodø, located in the north of the country, didn't even have the chance to take part in the league, as if they weren't even in the same country. This happened because the authorities decided to split national football in two. On one side, you had the southern provinces, from Trøndelag downwards, and on the other, those in the north, mainly in the province of Nordland. Obviously, all the strong teams were in cities like Oslo, Molde, and Trondheim, which are located in the southern region. I'd like to apologize in advance for my pronunciation of Norwegian words and names. The official reason behind the geographical separation had to do with logistical and climatic issues. Even if this were true, the reality is that there was also a great deal of prejudice behind the scenes, with the belief that those from the north weren't up to the standard to compete with those from the south. It wasn't until 1963 that they were allowed to take part in the Norwegian Cup, and in 1972 they managed to enter the league system that would eventually allow them to be promoted to the first division. Although, of course, to achieve this, they would have to prove themselves far more than those from the south. While the champions from the southern region were promoted directly, those from the north then had to play an extra playoff round against, in fact, the runners-up from the south. In any case, Bodø not only survived that entire dark period of Norwegian football, but also remained competitive and in 1976 achieved the long-awaited promotion to the top division. At that time, everything seemed set for the future full of triumphs that we see today. But, as is always the case in life, it wasn't a straight line that brought them here. During the 1980s and much of the 1990s, they failed to establish themselves in the top division. In fact, they even dropped down to the third tier on several occasions. The start of the 21st century didn't change the pattern either. From 2000 to 2005, they were in the top flight, then 2 seasons in the second division, followed by a brief return to the top division, only to be relegated for 4 years, come back up for 3 seasons, and finally drop down once again in 2016. A real roller coaster. At that time, football in this country was monopolized by Rosenborg, who had become something of a Norwegian Bayern Munich. Since 1992, they won 13 league titles in a row and have a total of 26. Bodø Glimt was little more than a peripheral side trying to stay afloat until the great turning point arrived. After they were relegated in 2016, the board became convinced that it would be the last time it happened and that, moreover, it was time to go after the big trophies as well. And what a successful rebirth it has been. After their immediate promotion in 2017, it took the club just 3 years to win their first league title, after which they picked up another 3 in 4 years. The 2020 season was particularly a record-breaking campaign. They racked up 81 points out of a possible 90, scoring 103 goals, averaging 3.4 goals per match. Absolutely mad. In the words of the general manager, Frode Thomason, when COVID hit, everyone slammed on the brakes. We put our foot on the accelerator. Back to Bod, they weren't content with just dominating at home. Of course, for YouTube channels like ENDF to want to tell your story, you have to go for the continent. As we mentioned at the start, their first wake-up call came in the 2021 to 2022 season when they beat Mourinho's Roma 6-1 in the group stage of the Conference League. Obviously, the match was played at their stadium, which everyone now fears. At that moment, it was a sensation in European football. No one could understand how a modest team from the Arctic had managed to hand such a thrashing to one of the teams of the world's top managers. Later on, the clubs would meet again in the quarterfinals of the tournament, and Bodø would once again secure a home victory. Unfortunately for them, they couldn't hold on to the result in Rome, and Mal's side continued on their path to the title. However, the real continental surprise would come with what they achieved in the 24-25 season. That year, they reached none other than the semi-finals of the Europa League. It was the first time in history that a Norwegian side had reached that stage in any European competition. The campaign began with impressive victories in the league phase against opponents like Porto and Besiktas. Then, in the round of 16, they knocked out Olympiacos, who were the reigning Conference League champions at the time, and in the quarterfinals it was Lazio who would feel the chill of the Norwegian north. By that point, there wasn't a single person in the country who wasn't aware of what was happening. They would play in the semi-finals against none other than Tottenham. To give you an idea of the disparity compared to those other three semi-finalists, any of their stadiums, be it Manchester United, Athletic, or Tottenham, could fit the entire population of Bod and still have room to spare. If we look at the squad values, the difference was outrageous. While the English team was valued at around €777 million, the Norwegian side was worth barely 54 million. In other words, it represented only 7% of the Londoners' value. Ultimately, Bodø's greatest achievement came in the 2025/2026 season with their qualification for the Champions League phase. This was also something they had never achieved before. It's worth noting that Norway does not have guaranteed spots in this phase, and to qualify they had to get through a preliminary round in which they beat Sturm at home 5-0. Now then, the truth is that up to this point, it's still a mystery how they managed it. Certainly, it wasn't the case that in 2016 a tycoon appeared and said, "I'll spend whatever it takes to qualify for the Champions League." Those who've been following the channel for a while know that without that, it's quite rare for a club to go from obscurity to shining in Europe in just 7 years. In this sense, Bodø's success is down to 3 pillars. The first of these, mainly due to a lack of money, has to do with spotting and developing young talent. This is nothing new at all. Clubs like Benfica or Salzburg are almost entirely dedicated to this. The difference with the Norwegian side lies in the geographical area they focused on. Their talent pool is almost exclusively Northern Europe. This obviously includes their own country. Economically speaking, we could say they found an underserved market. The reason they can do this is also because these footballers adapt quite easily, both culturally and to the climate, to the club's environment. Not everyone can go and play for a team in a city where temperatures drop to -10 degrees and, at certain times of the year, there are only 3 hours of natural daylight each day. If we look at what could be a possible starting 11, we'll find that most are Norwegian, with a few foreigners coming from Russia and Denmark. Regions which, as you know, are also quite cold. The bonus of doing this detection and development process well, apart from raising the level of play, has to do with potential sales. In mid-2024, the most lucrative sale in their history took place when Rennes from France paid €15 million for Albert Grimek. Although it's also true that simply focusing on a specific geographical area isn't enough. Nowadays, if you don't have good data management, it's very difficult to spot the next big star. Here, once again, they did it their own way. The club's sporting director, Havard Zachariasen, explained in detail how they do it. With data, as with other things, we followed a slightly different path to other teams. There are many programs and platforms you can buy, but we worked with 3 students interested in football data who wanted to collaborate. They now run the company Focus, in which we've invested, and we've helped them build it from scratch. Not only do we use it, but so do many Scandinavian teams. At the same time, he clarified, that's only one part of the scouting process. The club's culture is also very important to us and a significant part of our achievements. And that's not something you see in the numbers. We have to thoroughly research every player we bring in. If we get it wrong, it needs to be fixed quickly. Either they change or they go. With that technological advancement, combined with their ability to spot talent in that geographical area, they really had everything in place to find good players. The second of the 3 pillars behind Bodø's success is their manager. Kjetil Knutsen, who arrived in 2018, put all his focus on the training philosophy. For him, there is nothing more important than dedication and sacrifice for the sake of the team. His former assistant, Morten Calvins, told The Athletic in 2022, "Kjetil and I had a few meetings before pre-season. The first thing he said to me was, number 1, when we look at pre-season, I want you to focus especially on one thing, and that's the training culture. What's more, tactically speaking, up until 2018, Bodø was a team that played on the counterattack. They didn't take control of the situation. That also changed with the new manager. Calvin said, "We pushed the whole team much higher up. When we were forced to defend deep, we defended deep. But every week we were constantly looking for the signal to go from deep to high." Little by little, Kettle not only convinced his players that they could be competitive, but also that they were capable of achieving great things. However, that cultural mold with its focus on process would not be complete without the third pillar of Bodø's success, Bjørn Mansberg. He is a former fighter pilot and leader of the Norwegian Air Force Squadron. He arrived with a single objective: to strengthen the team's mentality. You might be wondering, wouldn't it have been easier to bring in a sports psychologist? What could someone with that kind of background possibly contribute? To understand this, we need to uncover the process he himself underwent. In 2010, still serving in the Air Force, he took part in a training program that involved the daily repetition of boring tasks, but with 100% of his attention focused on them. The aim was to develop an exceptional ability to focus and maintain mental control under pressure, something he would later, of course, apply during military missions in extreme conditions. When he arrived at Bodø in 2017 as a mental coach, he realized there was quite a lot of work to be done. According to him, it was a group that radiated negative energy and were prone to a collective mental collapse. That's why, from the very beginning, he incorporated meditation techniques and also promoted a culture of emotional communication. He then established a way of working based on the idea of train as you intend to fight, something which, as we've just seen, was completely in line with the coach's philosophy. And although it's difficult to measure the impact his work has had, many players have expressed the value of his methodology in their own words. The clearest example is the midfielder Ulrik Saltnes. Number 14 suffered from severe stress before matches, to the point where he even considered retiring. However, he managed to recover thanks to the work he did with Mansberg. In an interview, he said, "I don't think it would be possible to play like this without Bjørn and the mental work we do." In this way, this team based in a city of fewer than 60,000 inhabitants found its ideal system for winning football matches. Good talent scouting, a manager who encourages them to attack, and a mental coach to bring out the best in each player. The most interesting thing is that this is just getting started. Now, thanks to the good results, things are starting to get fun. I say this for a simple reason. They're now receiving a huge amount of money that they didn't have before. The big financial news has to do with the prizes awarded by UEFA in its tournaments. Reaching the quarterfinals of the Conference League in 2022 brought them €9.5 million. Consider that, according to Forbes estimates, the club ended up billing 30 million that season, so practically a third of it came from this payment. The following year, thanks to playing in the Champions League qualifiers and the Europa League group stage, they took home no less than €16 million. Finally, the big leap came in the 24-25 season, when reaching the semi-finals, where they were knocked out by Tottenham, would have earned them around €20 million. We're talking about doubling the entire institution's revenue thanks to that single result. And that's not even mentioning how much they'll earn now that they're playing in the Champions League phase. There, the figure could easily surpass €30 million. To give you another point of reference regarding the importance of this tournament, their national league in 2024 would have distributed something like €42 million among all the participating clubs. Bodø would earn that amount just for taking part in this European tournament. Ultimately, the team's good performance ends up being reflected in the value of the squad. While in 2017 it was estimated at €5.6 million, by 2025 it had reached €54.3 million. In other words, an increase of 869%. Now, that really is madness. The most interesting thing of all is that the club didn't squander the money. The first thing they did was to start the process of building a new stadium. This would have a capacity for 10,000 people and, although it's still incomparable to the continent's giants, it would already be enough to accommodate nearly 20% of the entire city's population. On the sporting side, while it's clear they'll be aiming to retain the crown in Norway, all eyes are on Europe. In the Champions League, they'll be focusing especially on the 4 home matches, where, as we know, they're quite a force to be reckoned with. Whether that's enough to beat Juventus, Manchester City, Monaco, or Tottenham, who are indeed the team set to visit them, remains to be seen. What is certain, though, is that no one takes all 3 points easily when they visit the new kings of the north. Bodø Glimt, after ending an 18-year drought without Norwegian sides in Europe's top competition, have nothing to lose and are certainly chasing something epic. Don't forget to subscribe, and whatever comments you'd like to make, we'll be sure to read them. See you next time.